Ready to go this morning with the round table, and with us at the table this morning, Democratic political analyst Marianne Marsh and Republican political analyst, say that 3 times fast, Rob Gray. You heard the education secretary sitting in a chair this morning make his best pitch to keep the MCAS graduation requirement in place. Marianne, Kenny, has that ship sailed already?
I mean, barring some huge campaign effort by the opposition, which Rod will talk about in a moment, the fact is that ship has sailed, and it is going to pass barring something like that. And so the discussion then moves to, well, now what?
Right.
And I think that's the big issue here. And I give everyone on the side to get rid of it. They've done a great job. They've spent the money, they've organized, they've got the ads, they've got the voices, and it's clearly out there, but probably too late to do anything.
Just as a point of clarity, so you're not confused, it doesn't eliminate the MCAS.
Right.
It just eliminates it as a graduation requirement.
And you say it's going to pass.
Yeah.
Okay, Rob, what do you think?
Listen, they as a special interest, the Mass Teachers Association, they don't like it. The governor, let's give her credit. She's opposed to it. She's spoken out against it. The education secretary is out doing shows like these, campaigning against it. Good for them. But the governor should have gone out and raised $5 million from common sense, bipartisan people in the business community. The MCAS made Massachusetts schools #1 to oppose it. She didn't do it. Why not? She could still do it. She could be out there every day campaigning against this. It's only at 56% yes. It still could lose. I hope that Democratic leaders go out and do more.
All right, presidential politics now. Vice President Kamala Harris coming off a media blitz last week. 60 Minutes, The View, Howard Stern, the Call Her Daddy podcast. Is it paying off? What do you think, Rob?
I think it's mixed. I think it helped her because she was criticized for sort of staying in the bubble and not going out and doing media interviews. Now, mostly these were softball interviews, but still in terms of the atmospherics, she gets credit for doing them. She did get a few tough questions, and I think one of those hurt her. She basically said, I wouldn't change a thing from what Joe Biden did. Inflation is up, the border is a mess. She basically said, I was part of that, I'm still for it.
Marianne, hurting or helping? What do you think?
Well, with 23 days to go, Kamala Harris in the 7 battleground states, ahead in 5, tied in 1, losing in another. That speaks for itself. And when you look at the show,
within the margin of error.
Within the margin,
Okay.
yeah. But I mean, again, she hasn't even been in this race 100 days. And look what she's done. So that's #1. #2, you know what their targets are by the shows they did. 60 Minutes, older voters. The View, women. Howard Stern, men. Call Her Daddy, young women. So you can see who they're going after. And right now, the big push is on getting more men to support her because they're not right now. And that she needs to close that gap a bit more to pull this off.
The next thing to talk about is misinformation. Misinformation about FEMA's response to Hurricanes Helene and Milton have taken several bizarre turns. False allegations about emergency aid being diverted to migrants. False claims that storm victims who applied for aid could have their land taken away. The Trump-Vance ticket even amplified some of the conspiracy theories. President Biden called that rhetoric un-American. The first question on this is, what does this say about the stretch run to Election Day, Marianne?
Donald Trump will say or do anything to get back in the White House, and he is. And the fact is, we've talked about this on the show for almost 10 years now. The worst is yet to come with Donald Trump in this election. He will do anything, and he is doing that. He is lying to people, and it's costing them their lives. Joe Biden from the White House press room said last week that, in fact, he knew the election would be fair and free, but he couldn't say it would be without violence, and it would come from the Trump side. So everyone needs to understand, if Donald Trump is willing to lie to people and lose their lives during disasters, just think of what is coming. So don't ignore it. Don't hide from it. You have to stand up to it and vote for it. But I am telling you right now, the violence that's going to go on in this country, if he thinks he's losing or loses, will make January 6th look like a picnic.
That's frightening. Rob?
Well, listen, I think on the storm, it's shameful what Trump said. I mean, the misinformation, it's terrible. They shouldn't be doing it. It should be condemned. Trump will say anything. I think a lot of times with what he says, he's snatching defeat from the jaws of victory because the race is so close that they think they can push it on the margins by doing dumb things like this. But it does indicate how close the race is. I mean, I think that September was Kamala Harris's month. I think October is turned towards Trump. He's catching up in advertising. In the Midwest, the battleground states are closing even more. So even though Trump says stupid things like this, he still could win.
I just want to throw one thing on the table, and if you make it a yes or no, I'd appreciate it. President Biden came out and spoke just before Hurricane Milton, talking about the hurricanes and acting as the president on one front. He presents himself as a president, and then he scolds the Republicans in the middle of that statement. Was that appropriate? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
100%.
Was that appropriate?
It's appropriate, but I don't think he helps her because it just associates Harris with Biden.
He was trying to help the American people.
Former Governor Charlie Baker is in never say never mode. To be fair, a lot of governors are in never say never mode. He walked away from the State House in January of 2023 and is now the president of the NCAA. But he was asked last week at a New England Council event if he'd consider returning to elective office. And he says, I never rule anything out. So thoughts on races he might consider, Marianne?
I think Charlie Baker's going to run against Ed Markey in 2026.
There it is.
You do?
I do. And here's why. And some of the best shows on OTR are in the green room. We've been talking about this.
The room backstage.
Right. The New England Council breakfast, the non-denial denial, was just that. Boston Magazine wrote an opus about Charlie Baker, and at the very end, he talked about a conversation he had with Mitt Romney, talking about how great the U.S. Senate is and all of that, and he was just like waxing poetic about it. Last but not least, the Deaton campaign is the Charlie Baker dry run for that race against Markey in 2 years. It is run by a Baker guy. It's loaded with Baker guys and gals. They are employees in exile and donors too. That says to me, Charlie Baker is going to run against Ed Markey in 2026, which is when he's up.
Rob, I'm anxious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I agree with Marianne that the main race that I think Baker would have interest in is the Markey race. It's also, I think, a winnable race for him. Ed Markey will be over 80 years old. Will have over 50 years in Washington. 50 years in Washington, looking for 6 more to get to 56. That's a campaign that a Republican can win.
I didn't hear either one of you say President of the United States. I was kind of whatever.
No.
We continue on the record. Stay with us.